Third grade was the worst. Early in the year, I had a group of friends. Kate, the de facto leader of the group, was my first. One day, I was one of them. The next, I wasn't. I never found out why. Shortly after that, one of my classmates informed me that my ex-friends had started an exclusive group called the Anti-Julia Club. Kate's idea, probably. Never underestimate the potential cruelty of 8-year-old girls. Fortunately, I did have one friend outside that circle, a kid named Michael. We'd known each other since preschool, and our older brothers were best friends. We saw each other all the time, and after Kate and company kicked me to the curb, we started hanging out in school as well. We got made fun of it for it too. People saw a girl and a boy spending time together and began to insinuate we were in love. Whatever that even means at that age. I don't even want to know what Kate and friends were saying behind my back. In retrospect, it turns out I'm gay, so joke's on them. It stung at the time, though. By springtime, I hated half the people in my grade, and I had some pretty mean thoughts about them. Though I kept those thoughts to myself. I specifically remember an incident with Allie, best math student in my class, certified arachnophobe, and Kate's closest friend. A small spider crawled across the desk, and she nearly had a panic attack. I said nothing, but I clearly remember thinking it was what she deserved. Michael and I did have plenty of good times, though. When we weren't playing with the giant chess set in the corner of the playground, yes, we were nerds like that, we were thinking of ways to break the rules and get away with it. Usually, this involved getting into places that were supposed to be off limits to us kids. Sneaking around the backstage area of our school's auditorium during the annual book fair was particularly fun. Not long after the book fair, he became bored again. One morning in early May, during recess, he presented me with another idea. "You know that shed behind the bungalows?" He asked me while we were repositioning the chess pieces. I always kept records of our game so we could pick up where we left off, even if someone else moved the pieces around in our absence. I nodded. Of course I did. All the third grade classes were in those bungalows. You did have to go slightly out of your way to actually see the shed, but I was a curious kid. "Ever wonder what's in there?" He was grinning now. I shrugged. "Tools?" "Don't be boring." He positioned the last of his pieces and scanned the board, or rather, the squared grid painted on the blacktop. "Anything could be there. Who knows? It might be the meeting place for a secret society." A secret gardening society? Michael considered this for a moment. "Why not? There are all kinds of crazy plants out there, you know?" That particular idea seemed silly to me, but I couldn't deny I was interested. It's funny how even the most boring places can become intriguing when you know you're not allowed to enter them. There was another problem, though. "It's always locked," I said. Michael grinned again, more devious this time. "Don't worry about that. Evan showed me how to pick locks." Of course, his brother would teach him something like that. They were both troublemakers. In any case, I agreed. It was fairly risky, but I didn't care much about that at the time. After I said yes, Michael seemed distracted by anticipation. At one point, he accidentally gave me a chance to capture one of his rooks for free. I'd hardly say we were good at chess, but we were usually more careful than that. We weren't going to try this right away, though, because we weren't prepared yet. Instead, we decided to do it on Friday. The day arrived. Michael had stuffed some supplies in his pockets, a tiny flashlight and a pair of reshaped paper clips to pick the lock. The teachers wouldn't care about the former, and they weren't likely to notice the latter at all. We had 2 recess periods each day. The second one, immediately after lunch, was longer. In order to give ourselves as much time as possible, we made our move then. When the supervising teachers' backs were turned, we slipped behind the bungalows. Michael took out his paper clips and began to fiddle with the padlock on the shed. Unsure how long this would take, I leaned against a nearby wall and waited. A voice came from around the corner. "Julia?" Michael's eyes widened, and he quickly backed away from the lock. His own eyes were wide too, but not from fear of being caught. I knew that voice. It was Allie, probably the last kid I wanted to see right now, other than Kate herself. "What are you doing here?" I asked as she turned the corner. "I wanted to talk to you." She shot a nervous glance at Michael. "In private." "We're busy." After several months of being excluded and mocked behind my back, I was in no mood to be nice. "I just wanted to say sorry," Allie said the words in a rush, as if this were her last chance and she had to take it before it went away forever. Still a bit skeptical, I raised an eyebrow at her. "Kate's getting meaner and meaner. I can't take it anymore. It's not right." After a long silence, she spoke again, with real desperation in her tone this time. "How can I make it up to you?" "You can start by not telling anyone we're over here." The impatience probably came through in my voice, because Allie nodded and turned to leave. "Can we talk later?" she asked. Fine. Despite my annoyance, I didn't quite have it in me to say no. Michael got back to work the moment she was out of sight. We didn't comment any further on what had just happened. For my part, I wasn't yet sure what to think about it. The lock opened after several attempts, and we slipped inside, closing the door behind us. Michael turned on his flashlight and shone it all around, and I soon saw that I'd been right. There was nothing here but gardening tools. And spiders. I spotted them here and there. Little creatures skittering across the walls. They were too small to really unnerve me, but my first thought was Allie would hate it in here. "We're in," I said. I glanced at my watch, a cheap plastic thing I'd gotten for my last birthday. "What do we do now?" Michael sat cross-legged on the floor and motioned for me to join him. "We have fun." And we did, for a while. We told a scary story each. I think that was my idea. It might have been sunny outside, but in here, we were surrounded by shadows, and to our imaginative 8-year-old minds, even something as mundane as a lawnmower could easily seem like a lurking monster. I don't recall much about my own story, though I remember Michael's story about a school run by a secret gardening cult that poisoned anyone who dared resist. I do know I got pretty worked up to the point of nearly jumping out of my skin when a spider crawled across my arm. Were they out in greater numbers now? It was hard to tell in this light, but they did seem a bit thicker on the walls. I kept an eye on the time. After Michael finished his story, I told him lunch would end pretty soon. We should get going before anyone starts looking for us. That was pretty much the exact moment things went wrong. Looking back on it, I think I know why. They now knew we were planning to leave, and they didn't want to let us. Michael was the first to notice. He pointed his flashlight toward one corner of the shed, and at first I didn't understand why. Then he touched my shoulder and spoke in an oddly high-pitched voice. "Look." It was a dark, writhing mass of spiders swarming out from who knows where. Instinctively, I backed across the floor, only to notice a similar black mass pouring from a different corner, outside the direct light of the beam. Michael inched closer to me. His hand shook. The spiders flowed in between us and the door. They climbed over each other, creating a large, shifting form that blocked our only escape. We didn't dare to move. I was never as deathly afraid of spiders as Allie was, but this was different. This was wrong. Abruptly, Michael gasped. "Julia," he said in a trembling voice, clutching his wrist in an attempt to hold the flashlight steady. Do you see? Do you see what they're doing?" The mass was taking a clear shape now. two rounded sections joined together, held up by 8 supports that each bent in several places. It took my brain much too long to think of them as legs, but once I did, everything fell into place. "It's a giant spider," I whispered. "A spider built from spiders." Waves of motion ran across its surface, but it stood still as it finished taking form. Watching us, I imagined with a slight tremor. Then, with perfect coordination, I took a step forward. We both screamed away across the floor, backing up as far as we could go. Michael dropped the flashlight somewhere along the way and clung to my shirt. "No, no, no, no," he kept muttering, sounding as if he were about to cry. "Calm down," I said. I admit my reasons for saying this were mostly selfish. He was putting me even more on edge than I already was. "How?" His voice broke a little. "Do you know how spiders kill their prey? I don't want to die like that. I don't." "We're not going to die." I wrapped my arms around him, and he buried his face in my shoulder, leaving me to watch the thing as it came closer. It stopped its advance, and it spoke to us. I don't know how to describe its voice. It was intelligible, but wrong, unable to form the sounds in the same way a human mouth would. If I had to guess, I'd say the voice was coming not from the monster's mouth, but from its underside. I can't say what was forming the sounds either. Maybe it was vibrating spider silk. "Julia," it said. "We know you are." A wave of sick terror rose in my stomach. Michael's breath was coming in little gasps now, and I held him tighter, as much for my own comfort as for his. "We hide, and we observe. We know how your former friends so cruelly abandoned you, and what they said when you were no longer there to hear them. They called you a loser, a freak, a waste of space. Do you think they would care if you disappeared?" "Leave her alone." Michael's voice was weak and frightened, but under the circumstance he made an admirable attempt to sound defiant. "We offer a deal," the monster said, as if Michael hadn't spoken. "A way for you two to escape us and never fear us again." "What do you want?" I asked, demanded really. "Your former friends," it said. "Deliver them to us." I blinked, speechless. Maybe the absurdity of the situation was finally starting to catch up with me. It took my silence as a cue to keep talking. "Bring them to one of the dark, hidden corners of the school. Those are our territory. How you do this is up to you, but be sure there are no witnesses." It paused. "They would have done the same to you." Was that true? I couldn't believe it. Kate didn't care about me, and in my mind's eye, I could easily picture her agreeing to sacrifice me to save herself. She'd probably have gone through with it too. I thought the spider thing's words had awakened something ugly in me, and in that moment, I could imagine her as a murderer. I could imagine that maybe if I delivered her to this creature in front of me, she would deserve what she got. It's horrifying how close I came to saying yes. Something stopped me. What about Allie? I asked. She just told me she was sorry. She wanted to make things right.
You can't tell us you believe her,
it said, its bizarre voice oozing scorn.
She would never turn against Kate. Never. She may regret her actions now, but in an hour she'll silence her worries and return to her best friend's side. Haven't you, of all people, learned to not trust anything she says?
Now that I thought about it, at my last birthday party, she had definitely said we'd be friends forever. She had a couple of other girls. For all I knew, today's apology might be equally meaningless. But I didn't want to believe that. I'd never heard Allie sound this upset with herself before, and given how much of a perfectionist she was, that was saying something. Besides, this was the first kindness any of them had shown me in ages. I wanted to believe it was real. I wanted to believe she could change. And another memory was coming to the fore, the image of Allie shrieking, bolting from her desk, and huddling in the corner, all because she saw a spider. I can't do that to her, I said.
You will.
The intensity of its tone shook me, giving me chills.
You must, if you want us to let you go.
Something was wrong. Even through my fright, I was beginning to notice that maybe it wanted a certain number of people, but still, does it have to be Allie? What about that kid in my class who keeps making kissy faces at us? Julia, Michael whimpered.
Stop trying to protect her,
the monster said.
Bring her to us.
But she's... I trailed off, gripped by a suspicion I had to voice. She's afraid of spiders. Is that why you want her so much?
This benefits you as well as us,
it said, more subdued now.
Be reasonable.
My brain processed the only fact. It hadn't said no, so I said it instead. No. My anger, fueled by months of being treated like garbage, won out over my fear. I refuse. I'm not going to trick her into coming to you, just so you can scare her out of her mind before you eat her. The bell rang as I spoke. Had that little time passed? It had felt like so much longer.
Are you certain? You have one chance to change your mind.
Michael's quivering body felt cold against mine, and that only strengthened my resolve. I would not force Allie or anyone else to face this level of terror. Yes.
So be it.
It stepped closer again, looming over us.
You two will have to feed us for now. We are tired of eating insects.
I pried Michael's hands off my shirt, grabbed an object at random, a leaf blower, I think, and swung it at the thing's legs. 3 of them broke apart from the strike, and the entire super spider collapsed, its balance disrupted. But in less than a minute, it had pieced its legs back together and pulled itself upright. My breath caught, my heart beating fast. My breath caught, My heart beat faster and I swung again. It did do some damage, I think, but this time I was the one who lost my balance. I crashed to the floor of the shed, bruising my knees. As I discover soon after, the moment I recovered from the disorientation, I made a frantic grab for the flashlight and turned to Michael. The giant spider bent its legs, lowering its head toward him. One leg reached out and brushed his forehead, a few of the individual spiders staying behind, scuttling over his face. He shuddered. "Get away from him!" I tried to keep the panic out of my voice, but I'm not sure I succeeded. It turned toward me, and I took up the leaf blower in my free hand, determined to fight back. So what if I banged myself up in the process? So what if my hands wouldn't stop shaking? I told Michael we weren't going to die, and I refused to let this monster make a liar of me. But it made no move to attack me. At first I thought it might be afraid of me. Wouldn't that have been hilarious? But then I heard the voices outside. Again, I knew these voices. One was my teacher, the other was Michael's. When my teacher said, "Look, the lock," I set down the leaf blower. We'd be safe soon.
Next time.
The monster's voice was barely audible.
Next time you enter our territory, we will find you.
It dissolved, for lack of a better term, right in front of my eyes. But the time the door opened, all that remained was a ton of normal-sized spiders, scurrying back to wherever they'd been hiding. At first, our teachers looked like they were ready to kill us themselves, but the anger turned to concern once they got a good look at us. My teacher asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't answer her. I just burst into tears. Michael's teacher fortunately recognized that he was in shock. That is to say, he actually had to be hospitalized. The rest of us went back to our classes. We didn't get much work done that day. At the end of the day, Allie pulled me aside to apologize again. "I told the teachers where you were," she said. "I'm sorry. I know you told me not to." I couldn't have been more grateful. Michael and I had recess and lunch detention for the next week. As a result, we missed Allie's huge and extremely public fight with Kate, but I heard about it after the fact. Once our punishment was over, Allie started hanging out with us. We didn't sneak around the school after that. Allie wasn't interested, and I decided it wasn't fun to disappoint all the adults I knew. Mostly, though, Michael and I wanted to avoid the spiders. All the dark corners of the school were their territory. They'd said that if we wandered out of bounds again, they might come for us. I never tried to tell anyone the truth. Michael never talked about it much at all. Still doesn't. In fact, unless he needs to vent to me about one of his nightmares. Yes, we're still friends. We play chess online a couple times a month. I still think about the incident a lot, though. Sometimes I ask myself questions. What are these spiders? How are they so coordinated? How exactly does a spider made of spiders even manage to eat? After a while, I always realize I'm severely overthinking things and force myself to stop before I lose my mind. More than anything, though, it bothers me how that thing tried to manipulate me. It knew I was hurting, and it used that against me, hoping to use me to catch the prey it really wanted. If Allie hadn't approached me beforehand, I'm not sure what I would have done. I have my own nightmares about the incident, and almost all of them, I accept the spider's proposal. After the fact, I always wake up trembling, wondering if I might really have done that under other circumstances. But that's not what happened. I said no. I didn't even lie to the monster, pretending to agree so it would let us go. My 8-year-old self didn't consider that possibility. In the end, I made sure it knew I wasn't its tool. Much as I wish none of this had ever happened, much as I wish my childhood best friend and I could sleep easy at night, I like to think I've learned something from it. When my anger threatens to get the best of me, and I'm about to do something I truly regret, I remember the spiders, and I tell myself that I can do better than that. I want to do the right thing, and I will be damned if I let my rage get in the way. This has been All the Little Spiders, written by TwilightStarfish and narrated by Remy Militello. If you would like to check out more of this author's work, a link to this story is in the description. And if you would like me to narrate one of your own stories, a link to my subreddit, Remy Reads, is also in the description. Please join me next week for another terrifying tale. Stay safe and keep creating.